Welcome to the Oral History Podcast, which features stories from the oral history website voicesofoklahoma.com, where Oklahomans have given generously of their time to tell their life story for present-day listeners and for the generations to come. Our entire collection is available at voicesofoklahoma.com. By subscribing to our podcast, you will be notified of new Oklahoma oral history podcasts. So now listen to another interesting storyteller from voicesofoklahoma.com.
Upon graduation from Oklahoma State University, Bill Atherton worked with Core Laboratories Incorporated in the Texas Gulf Coast in South America and served as an officer in the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers. He operated his own petroleum reservoir engineering company in Trinidad, West Indies from 1960 to 1964. Bill's career took a turn when he and his partner Pat Murphy learned how to make pizzas. In time, Bill became the co-founder, chairman, and CEO of A&M Food Services Incorporated from 1964 to 1986 when the company was merged into PEPSICO Incorporated. At the time of the merger, A&M Food Services was the largest Pizza Hut franchise in the United States. He was also founder of Taco Hut Incorporated and served as chairman and CEO until its sale in 1983. Bill is a partner of Atherton and Murphy Investment Company and chairman of Atherton Restaurant Systems Incorporated of Tulsa, Oklahoma. Listen to Bill talk about his relationship with Sam Walton, the Atherton Hotel at Oklahoma State University, and a bag of cash. All on the oral history website, voicesofoklahoma.com.
Well, my name is John Erling, and today's date is November 10th, 2021. So, Bill, would you state your full name, please?
William Stanley Atherton.
Your date of birth?
I was born April the 12th, 1933.
And makes your present age?
88 years old, John.
And you're going strong. In fact, you have deals going today, as a matter of fact. We could be interrupted, maybe.
I hope not.
Right. Where are we recording this interview?
In an office in our building in Midtown, Tulsa, and we're on the 10th floor.
All right. Where were you born?
Ponca City, Oklahoma.
All right. Let's talk about your mother. Your mother's maiden name, where she was born, and that type of thing.
My mother's maiden name was Frances Conine, Conine, and she was actually born in Stillwell, Oklahoma, but her mother was over there, and they were from Bentonville, and she always said she was born in Bentonville, Arkansas.
Yeah. What kind of personality was she?
Oh, she was wonderful. Very good housewife, very good mother. She had to. Everything had to be done just right, and we always had dinner, and everybody had to be there, and you had to have proper manners. And she was a wonderful person.
How many brothers and sisters did you have?
I've got two sisters. The 6 years is Lynn, and Patty is 12 years younger than me. Two sisters.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. But then, so you talked to your mother, everybody had to have manners. You had meals together then, right?
Yes.
That was important to be together.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Your father's name?
He was Jess William Atherton, and he was also a great guy. Everybody respected him and admired him.
Where was he born and raised?
He was born in Caney, Kansas. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
In 1890.
Okay, that's what was his personality like? What was he like?
He was he was one of the type of guys that could do anything, fix anything. People really admired him of his ability to accomplish any item he tried to do. He was an engineer by trade, but he did everything from back then, you'd call it dirt moving, but he was a dirt contractor. He had teams of horses and mules, and they would build everything for everybody where they had to move dirt. Yeah.
So he was always looking for ways to make money.
Correct. Yeah, and had various enterprises. He not only had a company called Atherton Grading Company. He had multiple interest in real estate, oil and gas, other businesses. Yeah.
Didn't he even have a business where he cleaned up the oil patch?
He did, because he had the equipment to do it with, and so he would go in and when they would build a location for the rig, he would build all the necessary roads and everything to get the rig in there, and then after they finished, they'd come in and clean it up. Yeah, yeah.
Opened a laundry service?
He did. He and his brother, when they were very young, went to Drum Ride. And that was the big oil boom then around Drum Ride and Cushing. And they roughnecked for a while. And then, of course, those were cable tool rigs back in those days. And I think they were in their late teens to early 20s, and they decided there had to be a better way to make a living, so they put in a cleaning establishment and cleaned the roughnecks' clothes, and back then they had Levi's, and that's about it, and so he had probably 10 or 12 years ago, I went through Drum Ride and actually saw the old building where he had that cleaners. Yeah.
Did Clark Gable make an appearance there?
Clark Gable was primarily working around Barnsdall, because that was another big discovery. And but he did come to Drum Ride and Cushing and worked, and Dad, he was just a roughneck, so they cleaned his clothes.
Didn't know he was going to go on to become a major Hollywood star.
No, they didn't. No.
Right. And I'm getting, maybe the seed was planted for you to always look for ways to make money. That comes from your father.
And his father, they were both real entrepreneurs, various businesses. They both loved real estate. They both loved working outdoors, and so I would say it came from my father more than anybody, because I worked with him.
Okay.
Yeah.
And was he a pilot?
He was a pilot, one of the very first in Oklahoma. He and they founded an airline called Bluebird Airways, and they had 3 airplanes. They had Jenny and 2 Wacos, and they would fly the oil guys from Pawhuska back to Bartlesville or Tulsa, and it was back in those days, to keep a plane flying was you had to be a real good mechanic.
Yeah, I can imagine. Right. Also, he was in the development business, like the Indian Hills Lake development.
John, that was a very unique idea. It was 5 miles out east of Ponca City on the way to Pawhuska. And he had the idea of kind of a country club at the time. And so he built this lake, beautiful lake. And back in those days, you didn't have to get any permits or anything. So he took his mules and his horses and built the dam, beautiful dam. In fact, the lake is still there today. And it was called Indian Hills Lake. And then he sold lots for people to build cabins, and he did it on the installment plan. They would pay $100 down and $10 a month for their site. He sold the sites, I think he told me one time, for $600, which back then was this was in the early 30s, and he he would, of course, carry the note on all those, and he built a beautiful clubhouse out there for the amenity, and it was kind of ahead of his time, you might say, on that deal.
And just exactly where is that located?
It's basically it's on the Arkansas River. If you come out of Ponca City on the way to Pawhuska, it was actually 5 miles out of Ponca City. Yeah. He had a ranch out there of about, I think it was originally about 20,000 acres. And he was able to carve out enough for the lake, and later on he built a house. He built a smaller lake down below the big lake, and that's where we lived. He built a house there for us.
Wow!
Yeah.
So you would have been, when that was happening, about how old?
4, 5, 6. We actually left Ponca City when I was 8 years old in the 3rd grade. Yeah, moved to Joplin, Missouri. Yeah.
Let's go back to your grandparents, because that leads us to the Oklahoma Land Run, and they were in the Land Run of 1893.
Correct.
We should point out, for history's sake, the first one was, of course, April 22nd, 1889. About 50,000 people were involved. Then another one in 1892. So then we come to the one your grandparents went. It was the largest land run in U.S. history, over 8,000 acres, known as the Cherokee Strip.
Sure.
Land was purchased from the Cherokees. Did you hear stories about that and how he accomplished this?
I did. They were in Caney, Kansas at the time, and of course everybody wanted to participate in the land run, and so my grandfather and my dad was born. He was born 1890, and his brother was born in 1893, just early, like January or February, I think. So he was a baby, and they made the run and settled close to Stillwater in a little town called Glencoe, Oklahoma. Yeah.
Do you know the mechanics of how that would work, how they would get it land? Would they go out there and search for it, or how did they do that ahead of time?
The surveyors had surveyed out 160 acres, and there was a post on each one of the 160 acres, and in it was the copy of the survey describing the property. And so when you would find the piece you wanted, you took that survey back to the recording agent, and I think it was in Perry, Oklahoma, for all that area around Stillwater. Yeah.
It sounds like maybe it was a little more organized than the first land run.
It was, the third one was much more organized in that respect, but it was still a very cumbersome deal, because everybody either rode a wagon, or they had horses, or they were trying to get to the best piece of land as quick as they could.
Okay, so there was a chase for the land, but he'd been able to go out earlier and know where he was going.
To some degree,
yeah.
Not exactly, but approximately.
Right. And then we should point out the final big land run was in 1895. So then your grandfather was very enterprising, and how did he come to have Atherton Moving Company?
Oh my golly, that was after they homesteaded out by Glencoe, and then they eventually moved into Stillwater, and he bought a lot of property down on what is Main Street today, and built a building, and it's currently 503 and 505 South Main in Stillwater, and he started bought a big truck, and they moved people, which was a pretty good business back then, and they became known as the only, I remember my granddad telling me this, the only furniture company that could move pianos, because they had some big dollies and some strong guys, I guess, working, yeah.
How fortunate you were to be able to be around your grandfather.
Well, he died when I was very young, and like 3 or 4 years old, maybe 5, and I hardly remember a lot of his stories, but then the grandmother, she would tell me a lot of the stories.
And I don't think we've mentioned their names. Let's give their names.
His name was James Thomas, and her name was Henrietta.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah. Did she live then beyond him? Do you remember her longer?
Yes, I do. Yeah, he died in 1935, 36, somewhere around there, I think. And so I was 3 or 4 years old. And she died in the, I think after the Second World War.
Yeah.
So,
okay, about you, your education. What was the first school you attended? Where was that?
That was in Ponca City, and it was McKinley grade school, and I went to the first and second grade there only. Yeah.
Okay, and then the first house you remember?
We lived in Ponca City. And then my father built the house out on Indian Hills Lake, where I lived.
All right. So by that time you had electricity and plumbing and all that by living in town?
We did, yes. Yeah. And we had electricity out at Indian Hills Lake because back then everything was a rural electrical deal, but Dad talked him into running electricity because he was going to build all those cabins around the lake. So we were one of the few rural houses that had electricity.
You just have to admire him to have that kind of thought. I'm going to build a lake, and then I'm going to sell property around it.
Yeah. And but there was great water there, so you didn't have to drill down too far to get good water, And so, and then he had electricity, which was a big thing. Yeah.
As a child or a teen, things you did for entertainment, radio. Did you listen to radio much?
We did. That was, there wasn't any television or anything. Radio was your main source of information and amusement. Yeah.
Remember some of the radio programs?
Oh, my God.
Fibber, McGee, and Molly.
I was just going to say Fibber, McGee, and Molly, the great Gildersleeve.
Amos and Andy.
Amos and Andy. Those kind of programs were very entertaining, You couldn't wait for them to come on.
Right. Probably laying on the floor.
Oh, yeah.
Looking at the radio.
Looking at the radio, yeah. You couldn't wait.
Those were good days, weren't they? They
were good days. Simple but good.
Yeah. What was the first car you remember that your parents had? Do you remember?
He had a Hudson Terraplane, it was called. Beautiful car. Small, front seat, and I would sit up where the back window was.
Yeah.
So it was only a one-seat car. Yeah.
So it was a coupe then, probably. Huh?
It was a coupe, yeah.
Right.
Yeah. But he had trucks, They had a lot of pickup trucks. Yeah.
Would you say then that your family was, you always had money? I don't know if you're well-to-do, or how would you categorize?
Medium. Dad kind of made the impression that he had money, but he was always scraping around, getting things done. Yeah. I'd say medium. Yeah.
So the Dust Bowl days come along here because they were from 1930 to 36, and you would probably remember some of that.
I do, John. I remember the sky getting so dark as a kid that you couldn't see the sun, and I remember my mother having me wet towels and put them around the window to keep the dust from coming in, and under the doors. That's how dusty it was.
And I imagine when you go outside, it was hard to keep the dust from coming in your mouth.
Not inside as much as outside. You just couldn't hardly breathe. Inside, you were able to block it off some,
Sure.
But yeah, you still had that odor, and the smell of the dust when you were inside.
Oh, there was a smell that came with it.
Well, it was heavy. It depends where the wind was blowing from. Yeah.
And so that was your Dust Bowl experience. So then we come to the Depression, which started in 1929 and up into the late 30s.
Late 30s.
Right.
Yeah.
How did that affect your family and your father?
That's what precipitated our move to Joplin, because the oil had gone down to, you couldn't even hardly sell it, and he had worked for Lew Wentz and E.W. Marlin and Skelly and Sinclair and all of them, and they quit drilling and they quit doing everything, and so his grading company, he had to, but you still had to feed the horses and the mules, but he lost all his good employees because he couldn't pay them. And then the people that he'd sold the cabins to and the lots, they quit paying. And so basically he decided that we would leave Oklahoma and go to Missouri, because there was talk about the war, and Missouri was the big lead and zinc company, and he figured he'd get into mining, so he sold his cattle. He had about 1,000 goats, he said, down there, and he sold the goats, sold the ranch, and we packed up our pickup truck and moved to Joplin, Missouri when I was in the 3rd grade.
Okay. But the Indian Hills Lake development, then, did he just have to walk away from that, or did somebody...
The bank.
The bank took it?
The bank took it, yeah. He did manage to sell enough cattle and equipment and stuff that we did have a little money when we went to Joplin. But as far as losing the land to the bank, he did. Yeah.
But in the Depression, there were probably those who needed help. Do you have stories? Maybe your father might have reached out and given food or anything to these people? He
did. He helped them a lot. All the guys that had worked for him were just great. I remember all of them because I'd play with them. And also there was a Ponca Indian tribe that lived on the land, and he helped all of them. Lived on the ranch that he let stay there, And then he had one guy that worked for him all his life, and he was he was one of the first pilots. His name was Brownie. That's all I remember. And later on lost an eye, so we called him One-Eyed Brownie. And One Eye would milk the goats down there and give it to all the women in Ponca City.
Oh.
I remember that, yeah.
Well, that was a nice gesture, wasn't it?
Oh, it really was, yeah.
And for a young lad like you, observing that.
Oh, yeah. I'd go down there and play with those goats till they'd start hitting you, I know.
So then, when he got to Joplin, then what was his business going to be then?
He originally thought mining, but it was difficult at that time because of the Depression. We moved to Joplin in 1941, yeah. And so he and another guy that went up there with him, they kind of started an insulation company, and where they would go around and to the grocery stores and every place and pick up the boxes, and then they'd grind up that cardboard, treat it so it wouldn't be inflammable, and it made a great insulation. And then he'd blow it into the attics of homes. And he did that for about a year, I think, until mining started picking up, and then he got into the lead and zinc mining. Yeah.
I'm just so impressed with that. Did the image of your father doing it, did that linger with you as you were even 50, 60 years old and making deals? Was your dad up there?
Yeah, I guess so, really, because we did so many different things, and, it just, I guess I inherited it.
Well, and a great model for business for sure. But there was a dog when you moved to Joplin. You had a dog that was close to you.
We had a lot of dogs on a ranch, and but there's one of them. I said, Dad, we got to take old Flop to Joplin. He said, okay, put him in the car, or his truck, and we got as far as, I think it was either Coffeyville or Galena, Kansas, and of course we all took a break, and then when it's time to get back in the car, Flop was gone, and so I said, Dad, we got to wait on Flop. He said, no, we're not waiting on a dog all day, and so we left without him, and about 2 or 3 weeks later, after we'd got this little house in Joplin, darn if Flop didn't come walking up. So he had walked all the way, and how he found us, I'll never know. And but that dog had walked all the way from Galena, Kansas to Joplin, Missouri, and found us somewhere.
Isn't that an amazing
story?
Story?
It's amazing.
Oh, how joyed you!
I was. I don't know how happy Dad was. But
that's a great story.
Yeah.
Flop.
That's a heck of a name for a dog, isn't it?
Right. But then you were in elementary school there in Joplin, right?
Yeah, what's that?
You were in elementary school in Joplin.
Yes. Started in the 3rd grade, and that's kind of a funny story, John. I got appendicitis, and so the doctor cut out my appendix. And I got ether pneumonia, they called it, from the anesthesia. They gave you ether back in those days. And so I was home. I missed about a month of school, and the teacher was so nice. She would come to my house from school after school for a month and teach me, bring me the lessons and everything. Could you imagine a teacher doing that today?
Couldn't do that.
No way. So I didn't fail the 3rd grade.
Well, then you went beyond elementary school, then in junior high there? in
North Junior High School in Joplin, and then later on Joplin High School.
What year did you graduate from Joplin?
1951.
So Pearl Harbor, 1941. Mm-hmm. You were pretty young when that happened.
Yeah, 8 years old.
Okay, do you have any memory of that?
Yeah, because they started rationing about everything, from gasoline to all of that to all your groceries. You could only buy certain things, and you either had food stamps or gasoline stamps or something. Fortunately, since Dad was a contractor, he was able to get a lot of gasoline stamps, and so he had all the fuel they wanted. Food stamps, I don't remember much about them. I know you had to go to the store, and they'd take so many of your food stamps to buy a pound of sugar or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
But as a young boy, did you know anybody who went to serve then?
Oh yeah, on my mother's side of the family, she had 2 brothers that served. One of them served in the European theater, particularly in Africa, and came up through Sicily and Italy. And he got wounded. Then there was another brother that served out in the Pacific Theater, yeah. So,
your high school days in Joplin, were they fun? Were you in...
A lot of fun, great high school, very, very, very good teachers, and they were very strict back in those days. You didn't backtalk a teacher or do anything. You just, yes, sir, no, sir. And good coaches. I played a little basketball, and so they were. It was just a great experience and a lot of good friends. Yeah.
Would you consider yourself a good student, marginal, or what maybe you were top of your class?
in some courses, I really liked math, physics, those type of subjects. I think I was above average, in high school.
So then you graduate in 1951. Then what do you do?
Go to Oklahoma A&M College in Stillwater, Oklahoma.
You'd been looking forward to that for a long time, weren't you?
My father was a civil engineer, but I leaned more towards, back then the oil and gas business really appealed to me. So I majored in petroleum engineering. Yeah.
What was, remember the cost of tuition in 1951?
You're not going to believe this. It was $43 a semester.
Was that considered a fair amount, a large, or what?
That was just average, I guess, back then. I guess, that wouldn't buy a book today.
Right.
But,
so your life at Oklahoma A&M, what was that like?
I really enjoyed it. I made a lot of very good friends. Most of the engineering classes were very small. They were 10, 12, 15 people, not like today. And I had very, very good instructors, and I don't know if I learned anything or not, but it was Joplin had a very good school system. So my freshman year, everything was easy because just like all the math classes were easy, physics, everything was easy. As you went a little bit further, it got a little more difficult. And I know I struggled in calculus. I struggled in differential equations. Or organic chemistry, I never did figure that out. But I did manage to get through.
Yes, and you graduated in what year?
In 1956.
And what was your degree then?
It was a Bachelor of Science in Petroleum Engineering.
How about summer times when you were in college?
Oh, boy, we worked. The first year, a group came out of Belvedere, Illinois, looking for farm boys that could drive trucks and everything. So we worked up in Illinois in harvest. We harvest peas and corn and take it all into the cannery. The cannery was called Rock Island Canning Company, and I learned then that they would can for Del Monte, they would can for Green Giant, but it was all the same thing. It was just what label they put on the cans. But we worked up there in both peas and corn harvest. And then my second year, since I was in ROTC, we went to summer camp out in Camp Carson, Colorado, at Colorado Springs. I really liked that. And then the other summers we worked in the oil field around Cushing and Payne County, mostly just roughnecking or roustaboutting.
Colorado, did you say you did some work there?
Yeah, we did.
Yeah.
Beautiful Colorado Springs. That's where I first. They were starting to really mine uranium, and when I was at Camp Carson, we'd go into Colorado Springs, and all the guys would come in with their Geiger counters, and so I asked them why they were hunting for uranium, And, boy, they were mining particularly in Utah and Colorado at the time. So when I went home to Joplin, I told Dad, I said, all the lead and zinc mines are shut down now. I said, you ought to go out west and mine uranium. And darn if we didn't do it. My junior year, we went out to Moab, Utah, and started mining. We got some pretty good luck. We had 2 good mines out there, and then we would lease up a lot of stuff and sell the leases. I know that year I sold 16 leases to Kerr McGee. They were getting big out there in Oklahoma City. made a little money, came back to college, and thought I was rich.
Wow. And you were able to make that happen as a student?
Yeah. And
sell leases?
Yeah. And later on, my senior year summer, we were mining down by Holbrook, Arizona, and we hit it pretty big down there. And we were selling, the big mill was at Grants, New Mexico, and Shiprock, New Mexico. Anaconda Copper had a big mill up at Shiprock, and we would ship there. And the government at the time, not only they kind of subsidized your uranium, they would pay you mileage for having to take it to the mill, and it was a pretty good deal. Yeah, it worked well anyway.
Right.
Yeah.
So after you graduate, what's next?
I interviewed 4 or 5 companies, and they would all come to the campus and interview the seniors, And I particularly liked an outfit out of Dallas, Texas, called Core Laboratories, and they were the pioneers in core analysis, in mud logging and reservoir engineering, and they had offices all over the oil patch, wherever they're even overseas. And so I decided to go to work for Core Lab, and they offered me $425 a month. They offered my roommate, Dale Easterwood, who was a lot smarter than I was, they offered him $400 a month. And I'd kid Dale, he'd say, "How come you got $25 more than I did?" And I said, "Dale, you just got to ask for it."
Did you ask for it?
I did. I said, I can't go to work 400, and they said, "Well, we'll give you 425." And I immediately started in Corpus Christi, Texas, with them, which they had a big laboratory there, a lot of activity going on, and mainly we were involved in core analysis and special core analysis. Yeah.
Oklahoma A&M, was that the last year, 1956, that it was known as that?
They changed the name to Oklahoma State, in 56.
Yeah. Right. But the Army comes along here for you. Now, you'd been in ROTC in high school.
Yes, and you're supposed to serve 2 years in the active duty. And I'd gone to work for Core Lab, and since the Korean War was going on, the oil field was a vital industry, and so I talked to the president of Core Lab was a guy named John Weisenbaker, very, very smart man, very good engineer and everything. And I said, "John, try to get me out of the Army. I don't want to have to go for 2 years." And he tried to pull every political string he could, but I ended up having to go for 6 months. They said on my orders that you're in for 2 years, so I went to Fort Belvoir, Virginia, which is a Corps of Engineer main base. And after I went through officers training school there, I went to Fort Leonard Wood, Missouri. And when I get there, they immediately made me a company commander, and I said, "Man, oh man!" And I had a master sergeant that ran that company, and so I called him in and I said, "Sergeant," I said, "you know a lot more about this Army than I do, so you tell me what to do, but don't let them know you're doing it." And we made the greatest team in the world, and he was tough. He was tough.
You were a lieutenant then?
Second lieutenant.
Second lieutenant then. And so that would have been in 56. So then it did help. It did help maybe that Core Laboratories tried to get you out. Why were you released after 6 months?
Because of the oil field.
Okay, so that did come into play.
Yeah, it did come into play. I only had to serve 6 months instead of 2 years.
You're right.
So that was very, very good. And by then, when I came back out of the Army, Core Lab, I went to Dallas and said, I'm ready to go back to work. And they said, well, we want you to go to Venezuela. And I said, well, you tell me more about it. And they said, well, we'll pay you $900 a month if you'll go work in Venezuela. And I said, get me a ticket. But I didn't have a passport. I didn't have all the shots. I didn't have anything you needed. But I went down to New Orleans and got my passport, got my shots, and I was on a DC-6 going to Maracaibo, Venezuela, shortly after that. Yeah.
I just have to say about Fort Leonard Wood, Missouri,
yeah.
I was there too. I did my basic training in 1964, and I was in the Army Reserve, so I've been to Fort Leonard Wood, Missouri as well.
It was tough.
But you were a company commander.
Well,
I was an enlisted man. You were a lieutenant.
Yeah, but still, I had to take all those enlisted men on those darn those hikes, and yeah, I had one platoon of total Chicago guys who had never been off concrete. And we'd take them out there at Leonard Wood, and, man, they didn't know what a rattlesnake was or anything, scared to death,
Yeah.
But they were good guys. They adapted, and we made it, yeah.
Right. So in Venezuela, then, your experience there?
Venezuela is one of the neatest countries in the world. It was booming. Lake Maracaibo was unbelievable. You'd have 500, 600, 700 foot of oil sand. You could complete a well and it'd flow 15, 20, 30,000 barrels a day. Unbelievable. A lot of the majors that were there were from Tulsa. Sinclair Venezuelan was big. Amarada Hess, Helmert and Payne was there. It was, I knew a lot of the people there, and I worked on Lake Maracaibo for about 4 or 5 months, and then they had built a lab over in eastern Venezuela, and the manager of it had disappeared, and so they wanted me to go over there and open it up. And so I did. I went to eastern Venezuela, and I spent a year and a half there until they had the revolution in 1959. They had a presidente named Perez Jimenez, and they decided he was a pretty good dictator, really, but they decided to kick him out. And they had a big revolution, and it was a bunch of guys. They nationalized the oil companies, they nationalized the service companies, they nationalized typical, socialism. They could run a company better than you could. And so I moved over to Trinidad, which is an island offshore Venezuela, moved our operation over there and built a lab. And so I was in Venezuela 2 years, in Trinidad 4 years.
So did you make it out of Venezuela with any cash?
Not much, but I saved all of Core Lab's cash for them. I'd met a real good banker in Anaco, Venezuela, and he told me, he said, Bill, they're going to nationalize our banks. I'm just sure of it, and you better get your money out of here. And so we had a bank account in Caracas. Core Lab did. I didn't have much. I was working for $900 a month, but Core Lab had quite a bit of money, and they had an account in Caracas, one in Maracaibo, and one in Maturin, Venezuela, which was close to Anaco. So I drew all the money out of the bank, all 3 banks, and I went to Dallas, Texas with a suitcase full of, I think it was 180, maybe 2, and that was a lot of money back in then.
How much?
I think it was like 180,000 or
that
something.
You had in suitcases?
Yeah. They didn't check you any back then. I go into Dallas and put the suitcase on John Weisenberger's desk, and he said, "What's this, Bill?" I said, "That's our money in Venezuela." And he said, "Well, why is it here?" And so I told him the story. He hadn't even heard about it yet. And sure enough, that very day I was in Dallas, they nationalized all the banks, took the money. I mean, Baker Hughes, Schlumberger, Halliburton, everybody lost everything they had. Yeah.
Well, the company should have given you a percentage of that cash.
I was kind of a hero around the office for a day or two.
I bet you were.
Then they sent me back to work.
Right, and to Trinidad.
Yeah.
And you were stayed there for a while?
I worked for Core Lab there, and we really were doing quite well for about 2 years. And then they called me and said, "Bill, you know, business is slacked off in Trinidad and everything. We want you to go to Bahrain." And I said, "I don't want to go to Bahrain. I like it here in the islands." And so eventually I said, "Let me buy you out here." And they said, "We don't license. We're all company owned." And I said, I'll cut you a good deal. I said, "I'll give you 10% of all the core analysis I run, and we'll split 50-50 on mud logging and special core analysis and any special product." And after a while, they said, "Okay." And so I go into the Royal Bank of Canada in Port of Spain, Trinidad, and why they loaned me the money, I'll never know, but they did, and I bought out Core Lab in Trinidad and operated it for over 3 years, and things really came back there, and I made pretty good money. Yeah.
And tell me again what Core Lab did.
They were primarily a reservoir engineering company, and they were probably the best in their field, and which a reservoir engineering company evaluate. If you go out and discover oil, then they evaluate the field for you and let you know approximately how much oil and gas you're going to produce. You know, it's pretty scientific, pretty difficult to do, but they do. And they also had mud logging, which it was a unit you'd set out on the drilling rig, and it would monitor the mud as it had come out of the well, and it would also collect cuttings so they could identify what you were drilling through, whether it was sandstone or shale or whatever, you know. And then we did a lot of special work for refineries. We were one of the few companies that could do gas analysis, tell you what part was methane, ethane, you know. And we did a lot of special core analysis where you would evaluate the reservoir in a different way, you know. And so it's pretty complex business, but it was very profitable. After I came back to the United States, Core Lab went public, and I had managed to buy a little stock in it, and it was a very, very good public offering, and they're still public today. Yeah.
So you're still in your 20s when this is happening, aren't you?
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Yeah.
So that was a big check then when you sold out your half.
Yeah. When I'd been in Trinidad 4 years plus, and decided to come back to the States, and there were two really sharp guys down there. Peter Gaffney, who was English, and Ben Klein was an American, and they had started an engineering company, and today it's one of the biggest. And so they kept saying, "Boy, we'd like to have core analysis in our company." And I said, "Well, I'll sell it to you." And I worked out a great deal with them. They bought me out, and later on, Peter Gaffney, they were doing a lot of work for the Argentine YPF in Argentina, the government oil company, and he became president of YPF too. I mean, smart. Both of them were so smart, and very good engineers. Both of them were engineers, so I couldn't. When I called Core Lab and said, I want to sell out, and they said, well, yeah, we don't want you selling out. And because we'll buy you back out. And I said, well, listen to my story. And so I even sent Klein and Gaffney to Dallas to interview the big boys. And they said, these guys are great. We'll let you sell out to them. And so I did, yeah.
So you have that big check. Did you buy yourself anything special when you first came back to the United States?
Well, I had to have a car. And I had a brother-in-law who had bought he married to my middle sister, and he had bought the Chevrolet Cadillac dealership in Warrensburg, Missouri. His name was Ted Linger. So I called Ted and said, Ted, I need a car. And he said, what do you want? I said, I want a Cadillac. And he said, okay. He said, I just happen to have the most beautiful Cadillac I've ever seen. He said, it's blue, it's a Coupe de Ville, and it's got white leather all through it. And I said, he said, it sells for $6,500. And I thought, oh, my God. And I said, what will you sell it to me for? And he said, I'll give it to you for $6,000. And it's been my demonstrator. You got 26 miles on it or something. I said, okay, I'll come get it. So I picked it up a few months later, and boy, it was a beautiful car. And that's the only thing I spent the money on.
And what was the year of that car?
63.
Okay.
63 Cadillac Coupe de Ville.
Wow.
Yeah.
Don't you wish you had that car today?
Oh, I wish I had it back.
Yeah. But didn't you meet a guy by the name of Pat Murphy along the way here?
Pat's been my partner, John, for over 60 years. The greatest guy you can ever know, and the greatest partner you could have. Pat came. I had a big job sold in Trinidad, and I needed help on it. So I called Dallas. They said, we're going to send you a guy named Pat Murphy. And I said, okay. They said, he went to Oklahoma A&M like you did, and he's a geologist, hard worker. And I said, good. And Pat came down, worked for me for about 6 or 7 weeks, came back to the States, lost track of it. And then I sold another big job to Standard of California, and I called Dallas again. They said, you know what happened to Murphy? And I said, no. And they said, well, we were going to send him offshore Louisiana. And he said, I've been there before. I quit. And so we understand he's in Wichita making donuts. And I said, well, can you get me a number for him? And they said, we'll try. And they got a number, and I called him. And I said, Pat, what are you doing? He said, well, I'm not making donuts. I'm in Bartlesville, Oklahoma, making pizza. And I said, what's the deal? And he said, well, it's a company called Pizza Hut, and I'm the third franchisee. And he said, I'm starving to death. And I said, well, Pat, would you come and work a job with me? And I said, I'll buy your ticket and I'll split half the profit with you. And he said, well, in case there's no profit. And I said, there's no money. He said, that's a good deal. He said, I'll be there. So I bought him a plane ticket. He came. As luck would have it, they got stuck on the well, and so we worked a couple other jobs. They finally got drilling again. And it ended up the biggest core job ever done in Trinidad. And we split, I think it was close to $10,000 each. And Pat was rich. And he went back to Bartlesville. And about 6 months later, and he called me, and he said, there's a guy that put in a Pizza Hut in Stillwater, Oklahoma, named Kendall Grindstaff, and he wants to sell because he's a big realtor. And I said, well, is it making any money? Well, it'll make a lot of money. And I said, what does he want for it? And he said, he wants $4,000. He said, send me $2,000 and we'll be partners. And I said, okay, Pat. And so that's how I owned half of a Pizza Hut before I ever saw it.
And that's how you got into that business.
And Pat's really been the best friend and best partner a guy could have. We didn't agree on everything, but when we did disagree, we always worked it out and founded a lot of companies together. Yeah.
Well, along in here, didn't you meet somebody by the name of Ann?
Yeah, I happened to run onto her. I came back from Trinidad, and Ann was living in Bartlesville, and her sister and her sister's husband were there, and of course Pat and Jet. And so Pat told me, he said, "Boy, she's a beautiful girl. You ought to date her while you're here." And I said, "Okay." And then Jet, Pat's wife, had talked to her, and so I had a date with her, and of all things, took her to a football game in Stillwater. And later on, took her to the Dallas Cowboys down at the Cotton Bowl, and she and I got along real good, and we got married on December the 11th, 1964. Yeah.
Children from that marriage?
She had a son named Dirk, who's my son now, and we had Tom Atherton and Jessica Atherton, and Dirk lives down in Florida now, and he's in the restaurant and real estate business. Tom is my partner up here, and Jessica's husband works with us, mm-hmm. And both of them sharp as can be.
Yeah. All taking a lot of information from you, I'm sure, and direction as well. They were fortunate to have that. Pizza Hut, let's continue with this story. First of all, the Pizza Hut story. How did that get going?
Pizza Hut was founded in 1958 in Wichita, Kansas, by two brothers, Frank and Dan Carney. And it was a little old 600 square foot building, and they sold pizza, and every morning they would come by where Pat was making donuts, and Pat went down there at 4 o'clock in the morning and started making donuts, and Dan and Frank would come into their so-called Pizza Hut, and they would start cooking sausage and cooking hamburger and slicing cheese and making dough, and they'd open up at 10:30. And Pat got to know Dan and Frank very well, and they had one. Frank and Dan Carney had sold one franchise to a guy in Topeka, Kansas, called Dick Hasser, and then they'd built another one in Wichita, and so they talked Pat into franchising at Bartlesville, Oklahoma, and so Pat was living in Bartlesville and had built him a little Pizza Hut, and then he and I had bought Stillwater, so he had two Pizza Huts that he was operating, and back then, you sold drinks for 25 cents. A pizza was $1.50 or something, and so you didn't run a lot of volume. And but Stillwater, being a college town, and we were located up by the stadium on North Monroe, it started making a little money. And there was a realtor, actually the man that Pat had bought the pizza from, Kendall Grindstaff, and we talked Kendall into building. By then, Pizza Hut had built an image building, beautiful building, trapezoid windows and everything. And so we talked Kendall into building a freestanding Pizza Hut for us. And so we had the third. Pizza Hut had built one in Wichita, the company had. Dick Hasser had built one in Topeka, and we built the third one that Pizza Hut ever had of the image building in Stillwater. And by then, Pizza Hut was getting, there were probably 7 or 8 franchisees. And so it was becoming a company,
Right. But you put money in, but didn't you have to get in there and learn how to make pizza and roll dough and all that?
I did that when I came back. Ann and I lived in Bartlesville for about 2 months, and she was working for Phillips, and I was unemployed. And I thought about going back into the oil field. Core Lab had called me a couple of times, wanting me to go to Colombia, wanting me to go over to Iran, and I just turned them down. I just didn't want to get back in the oil patch. And so Ann and I moved to Stillwater and bought us a little house there for $12,000. We were worried about the payment was $100 a month, which she said, "How are we going to make that?" I said, "We'll figure it out." And so I started learning the pizza business and worked in the Pizza Hut in Stillwater with our manager, who was a good guy. And we got it making a little bit of money, and I said, and in the meantime, we had a guy working for us that had worked for Taco Grande up in Wichita. And so he kept asking me, we got to put in a taco place. So we started Taco Hut, and I used him to put that in, and his name was Bill Leonard, and he ran it. And so I said, "Ann, let's go to Tulsa." So we moved to Tulsa. And by then we had decided, Pat and I did, that we'd put in another Pizza Hut. And so the Pizza Hut Inc. had already built two here in Tulsa, and so they wouldn't give me Tulsa. So I went to Okmulgee, and Pat and I built one in Okmulgee. And we also started building taco huts here in Tulsa. Eventually, we built 10 of them here in Tulsa. And then we went to Fayetteville, Arkansas, and built the biggest pizza hut that ever been built. It had a full basement under it, beautiful building. And we talked Don Tyson, the chicken guy, into building it for us. And he and his partner built the building, and they owned it for a long time till we bought it back from them. And that's kind of how we got into the pizza business. Yeah.
Right. But did you decide to stay in small towns, and was that your model? We had done Stillwater, which was about 20,000 people then at the most. We did Okmulgee, which was about 10,000 people. And then Fayetteville was the University of Arkansas, and a nice little town, but not very big. And so we'd thought about going to Little Rock and Fort Smith, but another guy already had them franchised. So we thought, why don't we stay in small towns, because the real estate's cheaper, the employees are better, the taxes are lower, and everything. So we started developing the small towns in Arkansas. We ended up with about 50 Pizza Huts in Arkansas without owning Little Rock or Fort Smith. But we had most of the small towns, and we went to every college town, Conway, Jonesboro, all those, and they turned out to be the best Pizza Huts in Arkansas. Yeah. Eskimo Joe's, did you ever compete? Were you gone? But how does that timeline?
Stan Clark, who is one of the best operators in the world, and thinking all the time. Stan put in Eskimo Joe's a little after we put in our first Pizza Hut in Stillwater, and he was such a good operator, and Eskimo Joe's became a legend, as he got into selling T-shirts and everything else. We had a concept, pardon me, here in Tulsa called Chimmy's, which was a Mexican concept, and Stan Clark, Eskimo Joe, wanted to put in a Mexican deal in Stillwater. And I said, Stan, we're not going to franchise, we're not going to license you, but what you do, send your people over here and we'll train them for you, which he did, and we helped him open up his Mexican restaurant in Stillwater. And he's got another concept. Well, he put in an Italian deal, yeah. And but Stan's been a great friend all our life, and he has done a lot for Oklahoma State University.
Right. But you had pizza, he had burgers. Were you competing, or was it different food? You both were able to survive because of the different kind of food.
And, well, Stan was located up by campus, and we were off campus. And pizza didn't really compete with, he sold hamburgers and beer, a lot of beer. And we didn't, no, we worked together on stuff, helping each other, yeah. He's just a terrific operator.
Right. And then back to Don Tyson. You said he built, but he had a chicken company. Was he also a contractor? Construction?
Don was an entrepreneur. His mother and father were killed in a train wreck when Don was very young, and he took over Tyson Foods when it was nothing. I mean, all they sold was ice packed chicken to Safeway and the stores, and thin margins. And so Don also did a lot of building. He built apartments in Fayetteville and Springdale, and their headquarters was in Springdale. And Don was a great man. He helped us immeasurably. Besides building Pizza Huts for us and being the landlord, he introduced us to bankers, to everybody you needed to know, And without Don, I don't think we could have developed Northwest Arkansas like we did, because we had 2 Pizza Huts, 2 delivery huts in Fayetteville. We had Springdale, Rogers, 2 in Rogers, 2 in Springdale, Bentonville, all that area we had, yeah. Pizza Hut that Don built for us, the building, like I said, it had a full basement. And that basement, we hired 2 would-be freshman architects out of Stillwater that had done a real neat building for a guy we knew. So we hired them to design the basement for us. And they did it on a Colorado ski lodge. A big fireplace in the middle, booths all around, real good atmosphere. And all the college kids loved it. And it became we were the biggest volume of Budweiser in the state of Arkansas, even more than Stan Clark was selling at Eskimo Joe's, because of that basement. Everybody loved that place.
Was that your idea to come?
That was our idea, yeah. Yeah,
great idea. Did you replicate that anyplace else?
We didn't. Another franchisee did in Indiana. There were 2 or 3 more, but not us. We just did that one.
You're in your 30s now, or 40s, in there someplace. Mm-hmm. Did you enjoy in the restaurant going around talking to people and thanks for coming in and all that kind of stuff? Did you do that?
Yeah, you got to do that. And Pat was very good at it. Anytime we would inspect a Pizza Hut, the first thing we'd do, of course, is look at the facility, make sure everything's clean and nice. Then we'd go around and talk to the customers, because they can tell you more than anybody else. If what's the problem? Be honest with me. Tell me about the place. And then we'd talk to the employees, because they only tell you what you want to hear. Yeah, we enjoyed that.
You're doing quite well now for yourself, and your home's in Tulsa. Mm-hmm. And while this business is growing, so financially you're doing quite well, and this has been a big boon for you.
Well, we actually moved to Florida in '86 because of Oklahoma's high taxes, and we were building. We had teamed up with a builder here in Tulsa, Pat and I had, and he built apartments and commercial buildings, and his name was Never Fail. You probably knew Never Fail, and Never was a great guy, a good partner, and Pat and I really enjoyed everything with him. And he had come to Pat and me and said, we're going to build these retirement centers. So he built one in Tulsa, and then we went down to Fort Myers, Florida, and built one, and then we went to Kansas City. Well, my son, Dirk, was the foreman on the job in Fort Myers. And after we finished there, we were going to build one in Tucson, and I told Dirk, well, I want you to go to Tucson. He said, man, I like it here in Florida. He's been there ever since. And that was 1987 or 8. And so Dirk tried contracting business, and then he put in a Mexican restaurant, similar to Chimmy's, but a lot better, really. And he's got them down there in Florida now. And so he's been there ever since. So, you know, we had grandkids, he had kids, so Ann and I bought a place down in Florida and made our residence there.
Mm-hmm. The restaurant name was Iguana?
Iguana Mia.
Yeah. And which is there right now down there.
Yeah, he's got 3 of them there now. One in Naples, one in Fort Myers, and one in Cape Coral. Yeah.
But with Don Tyson, you did deals with him and with another famous person by the name of Sam Walton.
Sam had started building a few Walmarts, and we did one with a guy out of Mountain Home and built one for him and got to know Sam pretty well. And so our policy was Sam would go in and buy a big piece of land to build a Walmart, and then we'd buy the outlots to build a Pizza Hut on. And we did that probably 30 times with him, from Iowa down to Arkansas and Missouri, Oklahoma. And our relationship with Sam was just, man, it was a handshake. Nowadays, Walmart is so big, you got to go through 100 lawyers to get anything done. But all those first deals with Sam, in fact, one of them in Clarksville, Arkansas, Sam called me and said, how's our Pizza Hut doing in Clarksville? I said, man, it's a good one, Sam. Well, he said, I own it. And I said, no, I bought that land from you. And he said, yeah, but I've never given you a deed to it. And that's the way he was, and he said, I'll have him take care of it,
Okay, but how did you ever meet Sam Walton in the first place?
He'd built one over in Berryville, Arkansas, and we bought, that was one of his very first ones, probably 5th or 6th Walmart. And we bought the property from him there, and had gotten to know him there. I think it was through real estate. Helen, his wife, had known, since my mother was from Bentonville, she had known Helen and played cards with her. But I assume we met Sam just through real estate deals.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So then what was kind of a guy was he to be around?
Oh, man. He loved to hunt. He was an all-around guy. He had the personality that he charmed you, really. I mean, he's just a regular guy. Amazing what he did.
A famous story about no matter how wealthy he was, he still drove around in a little beat-up pickup.
Old pickup with his dog.
Is that right? Yeah.
Yeah. Old Roy. Yeah. No, Sam was very humble. He didn't need anything. In fact, they had one airplane, and Sam was a pilot, pretty good pilot, and Bentonville, or they hangared there at Rogers, and we'd fly into Rogers a lot because it's the only one that had a pretty good runway. Sam was just happy as could be flying his little plane around, and today they must have 50 airplanes. They go all over. But Sam said, no, we'll always keep this little one.
I'm interested. That's fascinating. The first one, the Pizza Hut, you built by a Walmart. What kind of thought went into that? And then, because that concept continued on, you bought near a Walmart.
We did a lot, particularly up in Iowa. Sam had very good locations up there, a couple in Minnesota, 2 in Missouri, but most of them in Arkansas, yeah.
And he encouraged you to come on along? You were really on his coattails in a way.
Yeah, and we figured, all the thousands of people coming to Walmart, they're going to get hungry. They're going to see the old Pizza Hut in front, and so it couldn't be a better location.
Yeah.
It just couldn't be.
A great idea. But then, it's not just good enough to be selling pizza. You also had to form a company, A&M Food Service.
That's correct, and under A&M, we operated Taco Hut, which we'd founded. We were the franchisor of it. And then Don Tyson wanted to be bigger than Colonel Sanders. So he started Chicken Hut. He wanted us to give him a name, so we said, let's call it Chicken Hut. That'll work. And so Pat didn't go. I went on the board with him there, and we got up to quite a few chicken huts, even had 2 in Mexico, of all places, one in Guadalajara and one in Hermosillo. And Chicken Hut was really going well. I mean, we had the greatest product in the world. We had a potato we called Ozark Spud, where we'd take a potato and cut it in 4 pieces, cut it in half, and then cut that half in another piece, dip it in the chicken batter, and deep fat fry. That's the best potato French fry you ever had in your life. And of course we had good supply of the best chicken with Don. Pat and I kind of handled the real estate side of it. We built 4 here in Tulsa, 1 in Bartlesville, 1 in Stillwater, 2 in Oklahoma City, and built a lot of them in Arkansas. And then one day, Don came in, he said, it costs too much money, this restaurant business. Time you buy the real estate and build the building and get all the equipment, it's too much money. He said, I'm going to get out. He said, I need money for other things. And I said, well, Don, what are you going to do? He said, we'll franchise them, or you guys can do what you want to do. And I said, well, Don, you just can't quit like that when you've got 50 chicken huts. And I said, he said, well, you guys start selling them. And I said, okay, we'll try. And so at the time, Pat and I had teamed up with Bob Davis on Arby's. And so I thought, man, these chicken huts will make perfect Arby's. And so we sold Arkadelphia, Arkansas. We sold Conway, Arkansas, the chicken hut Pat and I bought them, and then we converted them to Arby's. And later on, Bob Davis wanted to own the real estate, so we gradually sold him the real estate too. But and there's another great partner, was Bob Davis, just an exceptional guy and good operator. And his son Jeff carried on. And
where did Arby's begin?
Arby's started in Ohio, Youngstown, Ohio, and Bob Davis became their franchisee here. He had one on Peoria, the very first one, just still there. And he came to me and said, I'd like to put in another Arby's, and I'd like to buy that chicken hut on Yale, on 51st and Yale, that you have for sale. And I said, Bob, that's on leased ground. I said, I don't think you want to own it. He said, but I love that location. And I said, well, now, if I sell it to you, you're going to have to assume the lease. And that was an old DX Sunray service station. I said, Bob, if you buy that location at 51st and Yale, you got to assume the ground lease. And I said, that includes the Phillips 66 station on the corner and your place at another vacant lot. And I said, the ground lease is $800 a month or something like that. That's pretty high to pay every month. Oh, I love that location. And so one day he came to me and he said, okay, I'll buy the existing building. I'll assume the ground lease, and I want to do the deal. And I said, you're my kind of guy. And so I sold him the location at 51st and Yale. And later on, Bob would say, man, these chicken huts convert to an Arby's so well. You got more? And I said, yeah, I got one up in Warrensburg, Missouri I need to sell. Okay, I'll go there. And we probably put in, oh, my golly, 10, 12 or more Arby's in old chicken huts. We did Arkadelphia, Arkansas. We did Benton, Arkansas. We did Conway, Arkansas. And they did convert to Arby's so well back then.
So 51st and Yale, very popular place. And you had purchased that land?
No, I had ground leased it from Sunray DX,
okay,
the old oil company.
All right. And now the gas station is gone today.
Well, later on, I tried to buy it, and they wanted too much money. I tried to buy out the lease because we'd sold a piece to Brahms. There was Brahms next door, Arby's, and we'd put in a hot dog deal, and then the service station. This is bad. But DX knew the value of it, and they eventually sold it, and then Bob bought his piece from the company that bought it, yeah.
But right now, there's a drive-through coffee place called Dutch Brothers.
They've torn down the old service station,
right.
Tore down the old Arby's. Arby's moved around the corner where their headquarters is, and they built that Arby's on Yale.
Yeah. That's amazing. And that Dutch Brothers is just now going to open fairly soon.
Right.
Amazing. 51st and Yale. A&M Food Service. I mean, so many things that you've touched turned to gold.
Well, we got lucky on some, and under the A&M umbrella, we had Pizza Huts, and at one time, we became the largest Pizza Hut franchisee in the nation. We were up over 200 Pizza Huts. And then they had a concept called Applegate's Landing, which was upscale Italian food, very, very good. And we built Norman, Oklahoma, Tulsa, Oklahoma, Bartlesville, and Springdale. We had 4 of them. And that concept got up to about 40 or 50 Applegates. Other franchisees built them. And then Pizza Hut one day said, well, they had one store in Wichita, and they said, we're going to get out of Applegates. We said, hey, guys, if this was your idea, you need to keep supporting it. I mean, we want help, And they said, well, we don't like the concept. It takes too much money to put the stores in, which they were expensive. They'd run close to $800 to $1 million just to build the building. And back then, that was very, very expensive. But they did high volume. And so we had Applegates in A&M. We had Pizza Hut in A&M. We had the parent Taco Hut in A&M because we were the franchisor, and we only had 10 stores here in Tulsa. When we took A&M public, we spun Taco Hut out of it in Applegates, so A&M ended up only with Pizza Huts. Yeah.
Didn't PEPSICO want to buy A&M?
They did, thank heavens. And Pizza Hut got kind of concerned about us because we were getting rather large, and we kind of dominated the advertising association, and we kind of got to where you might say we were telling Pizza Hut what to do. if we didn't like something, we told them we don't like that. And so they wanted to get rid of us in some way. And in the meantime, we had developed Minnesota, and we had Minneapolis, St. Paul, which they wanted because we'd really made a big success out of it. And in all, we had over almost 50 Pizza Huts in Minnesota, and we had 28 in the Twin Cities. So we shot them a high price, and they, of course, started negotiating and everything, but ultimately they bought us out.
But didn't you get up and leave the negotiating table?
Yeah, twice, but one time we were in Wichita, and fortunately I knew the secretary to the president. The president was a guy named Steve Reineman, who became Art Gunther was there first, and then Steve became president, and during all this negotiation. And the secretary told me, Bill, they really want to buy you. And I said, well, they're not acting like it because they're not agreeing to anything Pat and I say. And so finally we were kind of at an impasse. We'd told them there were three or four things that were non-negotiable. We had to have a stock deal. We didn't want cash. They had to honor all the commitments we'd made to our employees, and all these things. And so I said, Pat, it doesn't look like this is going to happen. Let's quit wasting our time. Let's go back to Tulsa. And we were out in the parking lot, and one of their little guys came running after us. Come on back, Bill and Pat, we want to talk. And so they agreed to everything we said, and we cut the deal.
So PEPSICO buys A&M. Mm-hmm. And that was a huge deal for you.
Well, it was, since it was a stock deal, it was, because we got that Pepsi stock, and we made our 10 or 11 key people, we made them millionaires, which they appreciated that.
They're living a good life today, aren't they? Right.
Yeah.
Springdale, Arkansas, was at Applegate's Landing. You had some famous guests there, Bill Clinton, Lou Holtz.
Oh, golly, they all favored our place there for some reason. And Lou Holtz was he's the best entertainer. He knows 100 one-liners. He can keep a crowd enthralled. And then Bill Clinton never shuts up. He talks all the time, And nobody agreed with his politics, but in Arkansas they did. But
was he governor at that time then?
No, he was a professor of law at the university.
Hadn't run for office yet.
But shortly thereafter, he did run. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. By the way, you talked about Potato Patch. You had that in Tulsa. Wasn't that next to South Roads Mall?
It was, and my son Dirk ran it. It was the greatest concept we ever developed, but we never got it off the ground because we were really too busy with Pizza Hut and everything else. But that women loved it. We had a gigantic salad bar. We bought nothing but big Idaho spuds. We'd cook them, and then we had 8 or 9 of them that were standard that we'd make for them. Or they could go to the salad bar and put everything on it they wanted. And my golly, we did a fantastic business at South Roads. We had one in Bartlesville, and then we licensed a guy in Memphis to have one, and that's, I don't know if the one in Memphis is still there or not.
How close did you get to the food and the tasting, and you had a new concept and you had tasted, and did you, you're a slender man, did you gain a lot of weight hanging around all this food?
Pat has a great sense of what's good and what's not good. He's really good at it, and we were both pretty good at knowing what would sell and what wouldn't sell, And we developed quite a few new pizzas. We had one we called Razorback Pizza. We really came up with what they call today the Hawaiian people pizza, which was pineapple and ham. and that made a great combination on a pizza. And but we were the first ones to really start putting jalapenos and green chilies and everything like that on a pizza.
But you had to do some taste testing there, didn't you?
Darn right. Yeah.
You talked about Chimmy's Mexican restaurant. I remember that in town. That was a great restaurant. And for some reason, that beef was just so wonderful.
Well, our partners there were Jerry Gomez and Nancy Gomez. And Gary was one of the finest Mexican cooks I've ever been around, and he developed all those recipes himself, and they had the one down on 15th, and we'd eat there every day. Pat loves Mexican food, I love Mexican food, and one day I said, Gary, you need a partner? And, oh boy, do I ever. And so I bought half of it, and Pat didn't want anything to do with it, and so I teamed up with Gary, and we put in 2 more here in Tulsa, 1 over in Springdale, and then he wanted to go to Dallas. So I said, okay, Gary, we'll build one in Dallas, and we did. And that's where Chimmy's kind of went down the tube, because Gary met a pretty waitress we had, and he and Nancy ended up getting divorced. And food was still the best going. We had 4 of them here in Tulsa by then, and they were all doing great. We just, with Gary kind of as the founder out of the deal and Nancy squabbling with everybody, we bought in management, and it wasn't a success. And so I ended up, I'd sold a part of, I was down to 29 or 30% or something like that, and I said, guys, I want out. And they said, well, if you get out, everybody's going to get out, and so we sold out to some boys out of California who they still do a pretty good job. I mean, Chimmy's on 15th in Peoria still does good. And
wasn't there one on Memorial, south of 71st and Memorial?
Yeah, and we had one at it was 81st in Sheridan, down to 81st in Lewis, and we had one out on either Mingo or Garnett, 31st out there, and they all did good. Well, we had the one on Harvard, 56th in Harvard, and it was it's still there today.
Yeah. So then you come along and meet a guy by the name of Mike Samara.
Mike's a legend.
And he is a legend in this town. So tell us about your experience with Mike.
Mike owned the property where our Applegates was in Tulsa. He's at 31st and Yale. And then he and Sade, the music guy next to him, they owned that building next to us. It was an old restaurant of some kind, and it had gone under. And so I went to Mike, and I had known him since I first moved to Tulsa, because he had this celebrity club, which was the greatest restaurant in town. And Mike's the greatest restaurant operator, hotel too. He had quite a few hotels. And Mike became a very good friend, and I said, Mike, what are you going to do with that old building next door? And he said, well, I want to lease it. And I said, well, you do a good deal for me? And he said, sure, I will. And so we put the Applegates in there, and Mike was just a great friend in everything we did, and from the Tulsa State Fair where we had Taco Hut, and he had, what was it, Big Mike's Hamburgers or something like that, and what an operator. I miss Mike. He was just such a great friend.
He's been gone for a number of years now. I interviewed him for Voices of Oklahoma, so we have Mike's story.
I think Mike was 93 when he died.
Yeah, and about blind, and he still could greet people.
Couldn't see a thing, but he knew your voice.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But you formed the Atherton and Murphy Investment Company. So what did you do with that company?
Real estate only. Pat and I would eventually build a lot of the Pizza Huts ourselves and lease back to A&M Foods. So when we sold out to Pepsi, we owned about 110 or something Pizza Hut buildings that we had leased to A&M, and so Pepsi assumed all those leases. So we had a pretty good real estate portfolio there. And then occasionally we'd go into a town, and instead of just buying the corner to put a Pizza Hut, we'd buy the whole block and put a Pizza Hut on one end, a Taco Hut on the other, and build a strip center in the middle, and lease it to a barber shop or a beauty shop or whatever. So we'd accumulated so Atherton Murphy Investment Company was primarily a real estate company, you know, and it also would own various things that Pat and I had that we didn't want to put into A&M, you know, like our airplanes or something like that, you know.
How about Harold Burlingame and John Barbary? How are they playing in your life?
Did you know John?
No, I didn't.
Did you know Harold?
No.
Harold was a pretty good-sized real estate man here in Tulsa, and he went to Mr. Barbary, who he owned Lou Boyles,
yes,
and consumer service stations. Remember them?
Mm-hmm.
And big, real great guy, smart and everything. And John. Harold came to him and he said, Mr. Barbary, I'll do all the work. I'll go out and bird dog the land if you'll finance them and back us, and we'll go 50-50. And John said, okay. So Burlingame went out and he did Tasty Freezes, he did Pizza Huts, he did Burger Kings, he did Quick Trips, and they built all the consumer stations together. And he ended up, he and Mr. Barbary owned about 100 pieces of property in Arkansas and Oklahoma. They owned Otasco. They owned, and they just did everything. And so Harold got a little bit greedy and one day went into Mr. Barbary and said, I'm doing all the work and you're just getting money and I'm not getting my share. John said, you forgot our deal. And so they got real cross-threaded. And Mr. Barbary called me and said, Bill, I'm going to get out of Burlingame. And he said, but we can't agree on what's what. And I said, well, why don't you split them up? You take half of them, he'll take half of them. He said, I've told Harold that. And I said, well, get you a hat, put all the properties in there and you draw one, and Harold draw one. John said, I'll do it. And he went to Harold, and Harold said, I'll do it. And so Harold ended up, the first one he drew, I don't want that. But they ended up splitting their property. And they had a big real estate portfolio. And they had Sonics. They had everything. And so Harold later called me and said, I want to build, Pizza Hut wants to build one in Owasso. And I said, Harold, go ahead and do them yourself. No, I need help. I don't have any money. And so I teamed up with him on about 8 or 10 Pizza Huts. We owned 50-50, and we had a Tasty Freeze and Sky Took, I think, and we did some things together. And it kind of got to where I found out, like Barbary, that Harold was a great promoter, put deals together, but he couldn't manage. And he was managing my half of the real estate. So I went to Harold and I said, Harold, I found out that some of our rent wasn't getting paid, and you never even called the guy, and so I'm going to take over the books. And he said, oh, that's fine with me. And so I bought the books into our office, and we started collecting the rent. And finally one day, Harold, he got a little bit more. He bought London Square down there, and he bought 2 or 3. He kind of got over his head on some deals. And so I said, Harold, I'll buy you out. So I bought him out. And then I sold down to 4 or 5 Pizza Huts, and I sold those to my son Tom and a friend of his. And they still got them today. Yeah.
And we should say, when you say, well, I had Tasty Freeze and all that, you didn't have the business. It was
just the real estate.
The real estate that went and supported that.
Yeah.
Right. All right. So Then there's Jim Treat and 7-Eleven stores.
Jim Treat was the biggest 7-Eleven franchisee. He had 7-Elevens. He had a company called Mako, Missouri, Arkansas, Kansas, and Oklahoma. He had a franchise that encompassed those 4 states. And he had over 100 7-Elevens. And then the parent company, 7-Eleven's, the one that got into difficulty. It wasn't him. Jim was doing great. Jim's a good friend to this day. And I had built probably, maybe pushing 20 7-Elevens for him that I owned personally and had leased back to him. And he did a great job, paid the rent on time, did everything. And then when the parent company of 7-Eleven got into trouble, it got a lot of the big franchisees into trouble. And Jim came to me one day and said, Bill, I don't know if I'm going to be able to make it without 7-Eleven backing us. And I said, I'm glad you're giving me a warning. So I started selling them off. I sold Fort Smith off. I sold some in Arkansas off. I sold Bristol off. I sold a bunch, but I ended up with 4 of them by the time he declared bankruptcy that I still owned. Yeah.
Did you know Terry Frost?
Yes, I did. Let's take a break.
Yep.
Yeah. Can we do that?
Yeah.
Yeah, Terry bought 7-Eleven out.
I'm going to ask you that when you come back.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Yeah, let's go on over Terry Frost.
Okay, so then I'm going to ask you about him. All right. So did you know Terry Frost?
Yes, I did. He was the main one that bought Jim Treat out of bankruptcy. And so he had I think Terry was from Nebraska.
Yes.
And then he was big up around Grand Lake.
Yes.
Had a marina.
Yes.
Big operator, great guy. And so there were 4 or 5 of the 7-Elevens that I still owned that he started operating and paid rent and everything. And eventually I sold out of those. And so, like I said, I ended up with only about 4 7-Elevens that I owned the real estate, that we eventually leased to Come and Go out of Des Moines, Iowa.
Okay.
So we still got them today.
Oh.
Yeah.
You own the real estate.
Uh-huh. Yeah.
Huh. I think
Terry was a honorable, good. I liked doing business with him.
And
I didn't know him very well.
As I understand it, he was in the construction business, and that's how he got into 7-Eleven, and then built a few of them in Nebraska, and then grew from there. And yes, he had Cherokee Yacht Club, and on Grand Lake,
right.
And so we got to see him there.
Yeah, I never knew him very well. We dealt with his secretary when it came to collecting rent.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
But then about 7-Eleven, it was Bert Holmes that came to Tulsa with that idea that 7-Eleven had in Dallas. And you know the story, and I have the story. I've interviewed both Bert Holmes and Chester Cadjo, and how he brought the idea to Tulsa, and it is what it is today.
Yeah, I personally built a few of 7-Elevens, Quick Trip's first stores.
For
For Chester, yeah. I built that one up by German Church in Owasso. I did that one with Burlingame. Yeah, he and I owned that store. Yeah, I think that was only one of the very first ones. Quick Trip is a great story.
Right, it is. And I don't know if you remember what he was selling in those days. He talked about they didn't know what to sell, and they had to actually sell the idea of convenience to Tulsans, because they said, well, why would I go there when I have to pay extra money? But then we began to understand what convenience meant. But I think he was selling wigs, he was selling tires and everything to find out what their niche was. Right. Yeah, it's a great story. We have both Bert Holmes and Chester Cadjo on our website, voicesofoklahoma.com. So then you own land at 71st and 169. And there was a famous man who built a hotel on that property.
John Q. Hammonds.
John Q. Hammonds.
What a guy.
Yeah, he was. I used to interview him quite regularly on the radio simply because he was such an interesting personality. You tell us about that and how he built that hotel there.
I met John Q. of all places. He was from Springfield, Missouri, and was one of the very first franchisees of Holiday Inn. And then he became also tied up with Marriott. And so he started building the first big Renaissance where they had the atrium in the center and rooms all around it, big restaurant, and usually 20 to 30,000 square foot convention center. And he was the first one to take the chance and do that. And but he had Marriott Courtyards, he had a ton of Holiday Inns, and probably one of the best, well, he was the best hotel developer there was. He knew locations, he knew sites, he knew everything. And I met John back when we were building Pizza Huts up in Missouri. And he had a piece of property, and we'd built one in Branson and Branson West, and there's the town of Kimberling City, Missouri, and it's right on Table Rock Lake, and it's where the big bridge crosses over Table Rock. And he had 35 acres there, and right on the water, just beautiful piece of land. So I called John and said, Mr. Hammonds, I want to buy your property in Kimberling. And he said, Bill, I'll never sell that, and I'll tell you why. He said, I was going to build a Holiday Inn there, and the good city fathers of Kimberling started telling me how to build my hotel and how to do this and how to do that, and they wanted me to do this. And so I walked out of their meeting and said, there'll never be anything built on that property, and that's how it's going to be. And I said, well, John, that was a long time ago. He said, Bill, I'm not going to build. I'm going to sell it. I said, okay. And then years later, I'd bought land out on Memorial in 71st, Mingo, and I had about 40 acres there. And John called me. He said, I got to build a hotel in Tulsa. And you got the site I want. And I said, fine, I'll sell it to you. I want to sell it. And he said, and so I gave him a price. And he said, oh, that's too much. I'll never buy that. And I said, okay, John, it'll be here when you want to buy it. And we left it at that. And a couple of years later, Stan Frisbee, the realtor here, called me. And he said, Bill, John Q's hot again on your property out on Mingo and 71st Mingo, and wants to buy it. And I said, well, I want to sell it, but the price has gone up. And he said, what do you mean? I said, he's got 35 acres in Kimberling City, Missouri. He's got to include that in the deal. John called me by then we'd become good friends and done some other deals together. And John called, Bill, you're a bandit. And I said, John, you don't want that old property. But I told him nothing would ever be built there. I said, it's not going to be you building it. It's going to be me. So he said, okay, I'll turn that in on the deal. And we worked a deal, and he built that beautiful hotel out there. And I got the 35 acres in Kimberling City.
And what did you do with that?
We were going to build a Pizza Hut there like we'd originally planned. And then Branson slowed down a lot, and we had a Pizza Hut in Lakeview, which is they call Branson West now, and sales were getting down in it. So we decided to put it on hold. A guy came along out of Springfield and wanted to build a big grocery store there, and he had just sold to... he had all the grocery stores in Springfield, and he had sold out to Albertson or somebody. I forgot who. And so we sold a piece of it off, 5 acres, for his grocery store. And then a bank came along, and they wanted to build a bank there, and so we sold that. Tom and I own that property together, and then the bank wanted to build another center, and so and then a group out of Fayetteville came and they wanted to build condominiums on the water. So we sold that to them. We sold them 16 acres. And so today we've sold off all of it except 4 acres, and we own 4 acres next to the grocery store.
So what will you do with that?
Don't know.
Okay.
We got it leased now to a guy that builds Ted's sheds. He sells sheds to put behind your house.
Well, that property
oh, man.
became bigger for you than you thought.
Oh, man, we made great money out of it, yeah.
Right. OSU, you're very fond of that, and the OSU Board of Governors?
Yeah, I when I came back from South America, I helped OSU some and went on the Board of Governors, and when you're on the Board of Governors, they select 10 of you that become the trustees of the foundation. And I was chairman of that foundation for a while. And of course, today, with Boone Pickens giving $500 or $600 million, it's when I was chairman, our goal was to raise $25 million that year. Mm-hmm. So you see how it's changed.
Right.
They're a $1 billion foundation now.
There's a nice concept on campus, the Atherton Hotel.
That's something I really enjoyed, and let me tell you why. Pat and I would hire students from the hotel and restaurant school. These kids were smart, they were good, but they didn't know how to work. I mean, in college, they learn all the book stuff, but they don't know what it's like to get in there and really work. So I went, Pat Knob was the dean of the hotel and restaurant school, and I went to her and I said, Pat, what do you think about taking the old Student Union Hotel, converting it to a real nice hotel, and then having the students work there? Let them work in the restaurant, let them make a bed, let them wash pots and pans, let them learn what the business is really like. And she agreed it was a great idea. So I backed put a little money in it to remodel the old hotel was built 51 or 2. The Student Union.
That's when you came there, and then you graduated in 56.
Yeah, the restaurant had been there, and it was old and worn out. The hotel, they had, back then, they built a little bathroom you could hardly turn around in, So we would take 2 rooms and make one nice room out of it. And so we remodeled the Student Union into the Atherton Hotel, and the hotel and restaurant schools started supplying the labor, and Jim Bernard, who had worked for Marriott and one of the best hotel guys around, he agreed to come back and run it. And without Jim, it wouldn't have worked. They did a great job, and then Jim said, well, we need to redo the restaurant, so we built the Ranchers Club, and really nice. And that's where the students really learn how to work in a restaurant. So about 5 or 6 years ago, they said, well, we need to remodel. Like any hotel, after 10 years, you need to buy new sheets and towels and everything. Well, instead of doing that, they wanted to redo the whole thing, which we did, and it's a showcase now. And we had to fight a few battles. We had to get the Regents, and that's when Jim Halligan was president, and we had to get them to agree that we could sell liquor on campus. That's not an easy task.
Right.
And we got that done, and today the bar at the Ranchers Club is the most popular place on campus at 5 o'clock. We even got a bunch of deans that were against it. Now they come over there and have a little, a little margarita.
But it just makes sense. Not every college campus has a hotel on it.
On campus.
Right. And so some of these famous speakers who would come through could stay there.
Oh, they did. And they all want to have a glass of wine,
Right.
So it worked out fine.
Right.
And it's a beautiful place. I don't know if you've been over there lately, but they really did a great job on remodeling, and the Ranchers Club is super good quality food and just really good.
Right now we know why it's known as the Atherton Hotel on campus.
Yeah, I did put a little money in it.
Yes, you did. You know, young people listening to this would be interested in several things here. Maybe you can give them a lesson learned in your career, and as you're doing that, advice to the young who are about to embark in this world.
John, we found that in over the years, at one time, Pat and I probably had over 8,000 employees. And, and we would find that the kids that knew how to work and not afraid to work, they made your best people, and they went on to achieve more. I loved Iowa because those guys would come off, and the girls, we had more women working for us than we did men. And they'd come off the farm, and they knew how to do everything. Minneapolis, St. Paul, they came off the big cities, and they didn't know how to do. They didn't know which end of a screwdriver you used or which end of a mop, And so we had problems finding good help in the big cities, in the little towns. And so mainly to achieve, we found that it's half perspiration. You got to work hard, and if you don't make it the first time, you get back up and do it again. You don't quit. The problem my son in Florida has now with his restaurants, the kids, when he's interviewing, the first thing they ask, well, what are our benefits? How much time do I get off? And they ask those questions, and the people would say, what's my job description? I said, you got to do whatever it takes to get done around here.
Right.
That might be cleaning the bathroom or picking up the trash in the parking lot, but that's what we all do, Mm-hmm. And so I think hard work's is the best lesson you can learn. I really do.
Yeah. Have you noticed the difference in generations to come, to follow you? There was the greatest generations they talked about, but then you get down to the next generation, and now we have, Gen X, and we have all of this.
Yeah, I don't even understand them all. But I think my father's generation that fought in the First World War and Second World War, that was your greatest generation. They didn't have a lot of government restrictions. You could do whatever you wanted to do, and particularly in the West, in the Midwest, Texas, Oklahoma. I mean, you did it on your own. You didn't have. I mean, that's one thing I admired so much about my father. Something broke down, we fixed it. I don't care whether it was the tractor or the combine or what. You learned how to repair anything. He never called a plumber or an electrician or somebody. He did it yourself.
Yeah.
And I'm sure it's that way up in
North Dakota.
North Dakota.
Right.
Man,
right.
Had to be.
So how would you like to be remembered?
I think we tried to help. I didn't want a person to come in and work for me and say, well, that's as high as I could go. We sent an awful lot of kids to higher education and paid for it. I think we tried to give everybody a leg up if they showed they were worthy of it.
Mm-hmm.
I would say, and Pat, my partner, he wanted to help everybody, and I think over time that probably was more satisfaction to have a guy that nobody thought would amount to anything. And I had a man call from Jonesboro, Arkansas the other day that built our pizza out there, and he was a big star at Arkansas University, a great guy. And he said, Bill, there's somebody here that wants to talk to you. And he said, he used to work for you in Fayetteville, and he's the big primary guy here in Jonesboro, and he is the best. We got the best attorney firm, and he's the mayor and all this. And I didn't even remember his name, but when I talked to him, he said, "Bill, if it wasn't for you guys helping me, I'd have never got through Arkansas University."
Wow.
He said, I remember those days working at the Pizza Hut, and you guys coming in and sticking with me. And he said, more than anything. So I think helping people is it.
That's a great legacy to leave behind.
Yeah.
And I got to remind people, and I'm amazed, you're 88 years old.
Yeah.
And you remember all this detail that we've been talking about. And you realize, of course, how blessed you are. You're clear of mind, and health is all. It's amazing to hear you.
Yeah, John, and that's what you've got to be thankful for. You know, I mean, you're still very active. Everybody I know, they come to me, oh, I can't wait to retire. You don't want to ever retire. Keep going.
You got to keep going.
Yeah, and I admire that about what you're doing so much, because you know, a lot of people would have hung up their spurs and said, "That's it."
Yeah,
and you know, I see that in Florida a lot. People come down there, oh, I can't wait to play golf, can't wait to go fishing, and in 2 years they die because they're bored to death.
Yeah,
you know, they really are.
Yeah. Well, you're not bored to death.
Yeah.
I think you've got. I said at the beginning, you've got a deal cooking in Dallas right now. So we got to let you go to do that.
Let's hope it closes.
Okay, right. Well, I want to thank you, Bill.
Well, John,
this is so much fun to get to know you.
Oh, it's my I've admired you for so many years, John, and what all you've done, and it's a pleasure to be with you on this. It really is.
Well, thank you for your time and your story.
Thank you, John.